Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first airing of Purdue Package, a new show that highlights a lot of things from the Purdue standpoint. Scott Sage here alongside me, Tommy Barrett, and we're going to break down things that not everybody sees every day with Purdue sports and also around the Big Ten. Scott, it's basketball season.
Absolutely.
How are you feeling about the Boilermakers this season?
Well, right now, let's just jump right into it. Wednesday night, we got the Buckeyes coming into town, 20th ranked team in the country. We had a great atmosphere in Mackey Arena last week for the Hoosiers. I want to hear your preview first on how you think we're going to fare against the Buckeyes.
The Buckeyes, the Boilermakers, 6-3 on the season in the Big Ten. The Buckeyes, 6-3 also. This is a game that's going to break open into the second part. You know, whoever's going to win this game has sole possession of second place, and that really is the biggest factor. The Boilermakers, as long as they can really dominate the paint, you see 7-foot players like Isaac Haas and A.J. Hammonds. Those players really can dictate a game, you know. That's exactly what happened against Indiana. Indiana had no size against the Boilermakers, and look what happened.
You mentioned it. It's a logjam for second place in the Big Ten right now. So this is a very pivotal game. D'Angelo Russell for Ohio State, keyed for them, one of the best scorers in the country, one of the best freshmen in the country. Ohio State loves to play zone, that matchup zone. Thad Matta said they didn't practice zone at all in the offseason. Purdue, for the most part this season, has struggled against the zone, especially when they're not hitting shots. They have to punch it into the paint to Hammonds and Haas.
Well, what I think is you have to start out in the paint. Once you start out in the paint, you dictate the game from there. If Isaac Haas and A.J. Hammonds can play well in the paint, then that opens up Kendall Stevens, it opens up Raphael Davis to get into the lane, that opens up Dakota Mathias. Also, John Oxius can get in the lane. The Boilermakers have the key pieces that are there to win a Big Ten championship and make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. They just have to execute.
Now, how about the two X factors, the sophomores? Basil Smotherman played huge against Iowa, essentially won that game for the Boilers, kept them in that. Bryson Scott came in and defended Yogi Ferrell against the Hoosiers. You think they have another big game, help the Boilers win against a third-ranked opponent this year?
Here's the funny thing. Against Ohio State and Iowa, those players played amazing. You look back to the Northwestern game when they won 68-60, they really weren't a factor. So it just decides, they just have to decide, hey, am I going to show up today or am I going to take the day off? And really, if they can show up, that's really the boost that the Boilermakers need. You saw the energy from the bench, especially in that Indiana game when Basil Smotherman came off the bench and Bryson Scott.
Right.
Bryson Scott, biggest game of the season.
Now with Bryson Scott playing well, that's 3 point guard options for the Boilers. P.J. Thompson, no minutes against Northwestern, and the Boilers still pull out a victory in Evanston, which has been a tough place for Purdue to win on the road. Now we've mentioned Ohio State, so moving forward, we said that this is a huge game. How do you see the Boilers the rest of the Big Ten play?
Well, when you look at it after Ohio State, you have Minnesota, Rutgers, both of those on the road. The Boilermakers playing exceptional at home, kind of not the best way on the road. And then you look at Nebraska, back to Indiana, back to against Rutgers, Ohio State again, Michigan State, and Illinois. The closeout of this Big Ten season is really going to dictate whether these Boilermakers are going to go to the playoff or go into the Big Ten tourney with some momentum. You look at it, Minnesota, Rutgers, Nebraska, Illinois. All of those teams have losing records in conference play.
5 of those final 9 on the road. That's going to be key for the Boilers. As they right now sit on the bubble, they're on the outside looking in, according to ESPN.com. What do you think it takes for the Boilers to get in? How many games do you see them needing to win?
I've been told you get about 10 or 11 in the Big Ten Conference. That means 5 more to go. You look at those 5 games, Minnesota, Rutgers twice, Nebraska, Illinois. We win those 5 games. You can see the Boilermakers in the Big Ten tournament with a good seed. Also in the NCAA tournament with about 10 or 11 seed, I would say. But if they can take care of the home court, they can beat Nebraska, Rutgers, and Illinois at home, grab about 1 or 2 on the road, you're definitely seeing the Boilermakers in the NCAA tournament.
And in terms of the Boilers' resume right now, you got good wins with BYU, NC State, Iowa, and Indiana. Bad losses include North Florida, Vanderbilt. Gardner-Webb was a very tough loss at home, along with North Florida. And that Notre Dame loss, although they are a highly ranked team, blown out on a neutral site, doesn't look good for the Boilers' resume as the selection committee starts to view them come March.
But you have to look at it. BYU is a good team. They're 3rd right now in the conference that features Gonzaga, number 2 in the nation, and St. Mary's, who's also looking on to the top 25, a bubble team as well. So BYU was a good loss, especially in Maui in the beginning of the season. The only thing that's going to hurt them is North Florida and Gardner-Webb. But those two games are in the beginning of the season. They're kind of finding themselves. You know, if they push for the rest of this season and play well, you really can expect the Boilermakers to play well or to get back into the national ranking that they like. You
mentioned those games were early. We could say that those North Florida and Gardner-Webb loss woke up the Boilers. You think that, you know, a young team, they think we're a Big Ten school. Here comes this smaller school coming in, home game, close to break, right after break. Maybe they weren't completely focused, and it woke them up. Matt Painter got to the guys and said, you know, you can't take any game lightly.
And that's exactly what happened, and you see at the games after Gardner-Webb. A huge push, and especially in the Big Ten season, we face teams like Wisconsin. That's a tough team. We played that Wisconsin team tough on the road. We only lost by about 10 points. So this Boilermaker team has potential. I give them right now about a B. That's what I give them. But if they can pull out wins, especially on Wednesday against Ohio State, if they can take 1 and 2 against Minnesota and Rutgers, I'm moving them up to a B+ or about an A.
You say B+, huh?
I say B. I say B right now. I say B.
Okay. Right now, I'm going to give the Boilers a C+. Moving forward, they could jump that up to maybe a B+, especially considering they are a young team. You do have that leeway there. But in order to make it to the tournament, they're going to need some big wins down the line here in Big Ten play. Going to need some Big Ten tournament wins in order to make it to be dancing in March.
How many conference wins how many Big Ten tournament wins do you think the Boilermakers need? Do you think they can slide through with about 1 win and hope for get on the bubble, or do you think they need to make that deep run in the tournament?
Well, a lot of that relies on the Big Ten conference play, the way that shakes out. And I think if they play well enough, they could get a good seed to maybe get to the second or third round in the Big Ten tournament. But I think 2 wins is going to be needed to make it to the tourney.
So right now we're shaping up Wisconsin, Maryland, Ohio State, Indiana, Michigan State, and Purdue, all deadlocked. Well, 5 of those teams, excluding Wisconsin, are all deadlocked right now for second place in the Big Ten right now. It's a tough conference this year, and especially those 2 losses really kind of put Purdue on the outside looking in. But like we said, if they can grab a couple on the road, continue to win at home, we like their chances, right?
Have to protect your home court. Have to steal a couple on the road. That's the way the Big Ten has been the last couple of years, maybe for the last decade. It's always been a tough conference, but I want to make this point, Tommy. Do you think it's a nature of a lot of good teams in the Big Ten, or a few at the top and a lot of mediocre teams?
I can see your case. I can see Northwestern, Rutgers, and Penn State, Minnesota all sitting at 7 losses, 8 losses in conference. Well, you have to look at it and say, hey, those teams are playing the top of the Big Ten. I think you take about 4 teams. You take Wisconsin, you take Maryland, you take Ohio State, and you take normally Michigan or Michigan State. And those are the 4 prominent teams, and then everybody else is kind of looking up and saying, hey, we're trying to catch up here. But this season, I think it's Wisconsin and Maryland, the best 2 teams, and then everybody else is kind of that deadlock, who's going to battle out for the 3rd and the 4th seed in the Big Ten tournament. And we still have about half the season to go, so right now, I'm liking the Purdue Boilermakers odds.
Right. You mentioned Wisconsin, Maryland at the top. We played well in both of those games. I think that the rest of this conference slate should be entertaining for fans.
This is why you come to Purdue University if you're a Boilermaker fan. This is what you want to see out of your Boilermakers, especially when Mackey Arena is as hype as it was against Indiana. They're going to want to expect that for the rest of the season. We'll be right back after this commercial break. 60 seconds. We'll be talking football.
We are all Boilermakers, but we're also much more. We're history makers, exploring the farthest reaches of our universe, often when strapped to a rocket. We are hope makers, rebuilders of Haitian cityscapes who ensure they'll now withstand any disaster. We are difference makers, developers of drought-resistant crops that just might end world hunger. The fact is, what we make moves the world forward. We are Purdue.
It's 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind.
Welcome back to Purdue Package. Once again here with Scott Sage, I'm Tommy Barrett. And now we're talking Purdue football. Also, we're talking NFL football. The Super Bowl last Sunday. Man, what a game. Featured two Boilermakers. One for each side. One got a Super Bowl ring.
You know, as a Boilermaker fan, you probably want Rob Ninkovich to get his first ring. Cliff Averill got it last year. Ninkovich played a key role, 6 tackles, 1 sack, including a big sack in the fourth quarter of Russell Wilson. Kind of turned the momentum for the Pats.
Cliff Averill left the game third quarter with a concussion. Man, he was playing well before that too. Cliff Averill last year, like you said, got a Super Bowl ring, and you know, I really thought he was going to get that second one, but the Patriots squeaked by.
You always hate to see concussion, especially to a Boilermaker. It's tough to argue the fact that after he went out, the Seahawks struggled. Patriots went down the field. Tom Brady had some success, looked more comfortable in the pocket, knowing that Cliff wasn't coming around the edge. But I want to talk about a little bit your thoughts on the game, just on the outset.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a Colts fan. So I didn't really care who was going to win the game. I just wanted to see a good game. And I really think that's what we saw. We saw one of the best Super Bowls.
You got just that?
You saw one of the best Super Bowls, and probably that I can remember. That late catch by Curse. Wow. Like, I didn't expect it. And
Patriots fan thought, here we go again.
With the David Tyree caught it on his helmet. Wow, that really kind of turned it around where it said, hey, I really think the Seahawks are going to win. Punch it in with Lynch. You know, game over. 20 seconds, let's see if Brady has it in him. And, man.
That call could be debated.
Malcolm Butler.
For a while.
Malcolm Butler, wow. Coming in off the streets, making a play. Wow.
Now, how about the wide receiver for Chris Matthews for the Seahawks, working at Foot Locker earlier this year, picked up December 10th by the Seahawks on the practice squad, moved up, first catch in the Super Bowl, biggest stage of your life, biggest stage probably in the world. You show out. You have a huge game in front of millions of people.
It wasn't even just Matthews, it was Malcolm Butler on the other side. Russell Wilson, 1 completion in the first quarter. That whole Seahawks secondary, or the whole Patriots secondary, really dominated Wilson. Couldn't dictate where he wanted to go, couldn't throw the ball, couldn't run the ball. And Malcolm Butler was a big piece of that. And he wasn't just an every down. He's not an every down corner. You know, he only comes in when they need him, throw an extra slot in the nickel or in the dime. And look at him at the end of the game.
Big play, big play. Now,
he could have been the MVP.
Again, that call can be debated, and we'll get to that later on in the show. However, this is Purdue Package. Let's move it back to Purdue football.
We're talking about Purdue football now. So how do you view the Boilermakers last season? They won 3 games, improvement. What kind of grade would you give them on an offensive scale?
Well, I think you said it best, improvement. 1 win the year before. 2 wins more than the year before is normally good for most programs. We only were at 3 wins this year, however. Quarterback change early on in the season. Iowa game, Danny Etling pulled for Austin Appleby. Appleby wins the first Big Ten game for Darrell Hazel against Illinois on the road, mind you, at Illinois.
That was a huge game. The locker room exploded after Hazel that's really where you thought the program was coming together. And I feel like even though the Boilermakers couldn't pull out victories, they were still in games and they were still battling and fighting. This Boilermaker team is on the rise just like all the other Purdue sports.
Right.
They had a downtime, now they're back on the rise. I'd give them the grade before the quarterback change. The offense was around, I'd say a D. They didn't play well. After the quarterback change, B-. Appleby came in.
B-, huh?
Appleby came in, he played well.
High.
He turned around the offense.
1-7.
Akeem Hunt ran for so many more yards. Danny Anthrop got injured. That's their best wide receiver.
I guess, 1-7 on paper looks pretty bad. Austin Appleby comes in, ran the offense pretty effectively. If you look, Michigan State, Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, all losses. Michigan State driving down the field, have a chance to take the lead. Minnesota, very close game, lose on a field goal. Questionable calls in that game could have shifted it towards Minnesota's way. Nebraska, they're in that game. They come back, they get turnovers. The offense can't capitalize. Wisconsin, there were 3 possessions they had in which they could have gone down the field and tied it up.
Exactly, like I'm saying.
Competitiveness.
Once Appleby came into the offense have shifted. They scored more points. They scored more points than when Etling was in there. Appleby came around and they played well. That's just how I view it. Is Appleby was the key to the success of the offense. The defense, I'd say, probably a C. Yes, the Big Ten this year was tough, even though critics gave them rough grades. But look how many Big Ten bowl wins there were. 6 of them.
A national
champion as well. So the Boilermakers really, I'd give them a C on the defense. They had injuries to Landon Feichter. That's the key. Robinson also got hurt. Frankie Williams played absolutely incredible throughout this entire
Honorary
season.
All-American.
Bentley as a freshman. The youth of the Boilermakers is really gonna combine them.
The linebacking core for the Boilermakers is where it's going to be. Jalen Robinson, Jawan Bentley moving forward. Jimmy Herman, another good player. But at some point, the competitiveness, Tommy, you think, has to start turning to W's.
Exactly. You have to take the heart and the soul that the Boilermakers we saw last year, and we have to turn them into program wins. You know, we have to take games when we have the opportunity. We have to beat Minnesota. We have to beat Nebraska, teams like that, to get back into the position that, you know, the Boilermaker football faithful, they were used to. And I think Darrell Hazel is really the person to bring it all together. And with the recruiting class of coming up, Markel Jones, a 3-star running back.
Mr. Football Indiana.
Mr. Football Indiana ran over 3,000 yards.
Needs to replace Hakeem Hunt.
And Raheem Mozart.
You got Keontae Green, got some experience early on in the season.
Keontae Green, Brandon Cottom, and Markel Jones, at least one of those players is going to have to step up at the running back position. As long as Austin Appleby's under center, they got new...
Now, do we think Appleby's under center?
I do. I believe Austin Appleby earned his position and is able to get back into the starting lineup. And I don't see a reason why Appleby should have been pulled. And next year, first game, he'll be there. Marshall, he'll be there. Now, let me take you into this new segment called the Big Ten Breakdown. 6 topics, 180 seconds, starting now. Okay, Ohio State, do you think they'll repeat next year?
I think they have to be the favorite in the country. Them, nationally, and Notre Dame, unfortunately, as it might be tough for Purdue fans to swallow, Ohio State and Notre Dame could be in that national title game. Notre Dame returning about 21 starters, 2 great, viable quarterback options for them. Moving forward with another Big Ten topic, Illinois manager Ryan Schmidt gets the call. Next man up.
What
a slew of injuries for the Illini.
Man, what a story. That is every single manager's dream. I've talked to Brock Davis, the manager here. I asked him, I said, hey, what's it like? You know, are you going to get called up? He said, no, I'm not going to get called up. But for Ryan Schmidt, a senior, that's the time right there. Okay, dancing in March. Who's going to be dancing? We got 6 teams right now in the bracketology. How many of those teams, out of those 6 teams, one of them was not Purdue? Who's going to be it?
Well, I'd like to hope Purdue makes the tournament. However, Wisconsin, Maryland, Michigan State, borderline maybe, Ohio State, especially with D'Angelo Russell, you gotta like them. Iowa's on the borderline, Aaron White battling an injury.
Woodbury's pretty well, he can play too. Do you think the Boilermakers are going to get in there?
I think the Boilers make the tournament.
Wisconsin, they're going to be a number 1 seed?
Wisconsin will not be number 1 seed.
Will they win the Big Ten?
I think the Big Ten conference hurts Wisconsin. On paper, we are not looking very good.
Okay, Tom Brady last night from Michigan. He's the man. He threw for 4 touchdowns, 328 yards, 37-50.
The Michigan man, he and Harbaugh, the Michigan men. Is Tom Brady the greatest quarterback ever?
Man, I don't think we have enough time for that right now. I'm going to say no, but just for the Boilermakers out there, Tom Brady is not the best quarterback, but that's just for right now. If he gets another Super Bowl, maybe we're talking. Last one. Call of the century, run or pass.
We mentioned it earlier. Super Bowl last Sunday night. You have beast mode in the backfield, 1 yard out, Marshawn Lynch. Seahawks have to run it, win the Super Bowl, become Super Bowl champs, right?
I see Pete Carroll's reason. I see it. You know, waste it down, get 3rd and 4th down to run it maybe, but you have a timeout. Use beast mode. The best running back, best power running back in the game. Patriots, Super Bowl champions. What a Super Bowl. What a Super Bowl. Marshawn Lynch, though, will he be back? That's the question.
Without a doubt, Tommy. I had a lot of fun.
I did have a lot of fun. First airing right now here at Purdue Package. We want to thank you for joining us. Once again, Scott Sage, Tommy Barrett, we'll be back.